Chapter 1: Equilibrium in the Election Campaign. In the run-up to a historic election in which America was divided between two flamboyant political figures, the campaign had achieved an incredible balance. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, seemingly diametrically opposed, were in fact locked in a bitter contest where every vote counted, and every vote counted as a battle for the hearts of citizens. Millions of Americans were excitedly discussing debates, rallies, and television appearances, and there was an air of equality everywhere, with Trump showing up on some streets and Harris showing up on others. The steady distribution of votes and the balanced support on both sides created the appearance of a perfect counterweight, with no one candidate having a clear advantage. On city streets, in small cafes and at large rallies, slogans were heard calling for change, but also for the preservation of traditional values. In every district of the country, there was an unshakable belief that the elections would be a test not only of political ideas, but also of moral principles. People obsessed with hope for a better future watched the campaign with trepidation, knowing that the fate of the nation depended on every vote. The press heatedly discussed the polls, where the results did not fluctuate. Support for both candidates was almost identical, and each election meeting caused a storm of emotions and expectations. At this point, there was a sense of an inevitable showdown that would finally unfold on Election Day. Each campaign had developed its own strategies to mobilize voters, holding thousands of meetings, organizing debates, and using technology to engage the public. Trump, known for his determination and sharp language, promised radical change, while Harris, a progressive, advocated for inclusion and social equality. Under pressure from time and public scrutiny, each side struggled to maintain balance as voters looked to them for strength, determination, and ability to rise to the challenge. Behind the glamorous campaigns, filled with catchy slogans and large-scale events, there was another side to this struggle: the internal dynamics of political intrigue and strategic maneuvering that took place behind the scenes. Fierce negotiations were taking place at both campaign headquarters about the distribution of resources, tactics for working with voters, and ways to combat potential scandals. Suddenly, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Polls showed equality, and the campaigns, a verified, almost mathematical precision in the distribution of votes. This symmetry inspired confidence in supporters of both candidates and created the illusion of an objective choice, where each point of view had a right to exist. However, changes were already brewing in this apparent balance. Behind the facade of public speeches and organized rallies, tensions were lurking that were about to tear the balance apart. At first, no one could have suspected that it was precisely at the last moment of the election race that voices would emerge that could radically change the outcome of the election. These voices, which had been almost elusive until then, became a phenomenon that could soon upset the perfect balance between Trump and Harris. It was at the very moment when each side believed that its support was consistently high that the world learned about an unexpected turn of events. Unknown votes began to arrive in huge numbers, and the election results seemed to be rewritten right at the threshold of the end of voting. Thus, in an atmosphere of intense emotion, high political activity and undeniable equilibrium, begins a story that will soon open the eyes of the entire world to the secrets and intrigues hidden behind the facade of the election campaign. This chapter sets the tone for the entire subsequent development of events, foreshadowing that behind the apparent symmetry and balance there may be a force capable of changing the very essence of the elections and the fate of the country. In the run-up to the final act of the struggle for power, people did not suspect that the last minutes of the vote would bring changes capable of upending established ideas about the democratic process. And the fight for every vote would become the beginning of a new, unexpected era of change. Chapter 2: An Unexpected Shift in Voices. In the run-up to the final act of the election, with the public and analysts watching every vote, the balance between Trump and Harris seemed to be in perfect balance. Across the country, polls and early data showed a nearly identical vote distribution, giving the race the appearance of a fair fight for power. But soon, things began to change, as if fate had decided to add an unexpected twist to this carefully crafted script. Hours before the polls officially closed, reports began to emerge of a strange phenomenon: unknown votes, not counted in the initial tally, were being added en masse to the final tally, and, as it turned out, at the very last moment of the election, they tipped the tie in Trump's favor. These extra ballots, suddenly appearing as a result of the recount, shocked election officials and political analysts alike, plunging the entire campaign into an atmosphere of confusion and anxiety. The focus was on voting machines, polling station data, and secret reports, from which a shift was slowly emerging that could change the outcome of the entire campaign. A tense debate erupted in the Trump campaign offices. Strategists and analysts pored over the latest data, trying to figure out where these extra votes could have come from. At first, it was assumed that it was a technical error or a glitch in the system, but an inspection showed that each of these votes had been registered correctly and followed established protocols. It soon became clear that these votes were not a coincidence, but an organized group, acting secretly and purposefully. The conspiracy was slowly taking shape. Unknown voices, appearing at the most critical moment, had radically changed the balance of power, and now Trump had a victory that had previously seemed unattainable. The investigation into this phenomenon began with a thorough analysis of the data. A team of state and independent analysts examined each case, recording the time and place of votes. These ballots were observed to come from specific precincts where voter turnout appeared to have spiked in the final hours of voting. Particular attention was paid to the electronic vote counting system, which, despite all the checks, continued to produce unexpected results. Gradually, as a result of painstaking work, increasingly convincing evidence began to emerge that Trump's additional support was organized from outside. The public began to actively discuss the topic. Thousands of comments appeared on social networks, news headlines asked about the integrity of the election and who could have fixed such an outcome. Some experts assumed that political maneuvering by opponents was behind it, but soon evidence emerged indicating that the source of the additional votes was Biden supporters. These people, unhappy that Kamala Harris, the vice presidential pick, could be overshadowed by Joe Biden's influence, received some kind of secret order to vote for Trump. This unexpected outcome shocked everyone. Biden supporters, seeking to undermine his team, secretly shifted their support to a candidate they considered less dangerous to their interests. Internal audits and leaks revealed that such vote manipulation was organized and systematic. Documents, emails, and financial reports provided irrefutable evidence that a group of activists affiliated with the opponent was deliberately altering the electoral scores at the last minute. This turn of events was a real blow to the reputation of the electoral system, undermining confidence in the integrity of the vote and causing heated debate in political circles. Many critics argued that such actions were unacceptable in a democratic society, and that each vote should be counted solely according to the will of the people, and not manipulated from the outside. Thus, the second chapter of the story reveals the mysterious and unexpected shift in the election results. The unusual additional votes that appeared at the most critical moment caused the balance of equality to be upset, and the victory that seemed unattainable passed into the hands of Donald Trump. This chapter sets the tone for the entire subsequent drama, where the question of the fairness of the electoral process and secret manipulation become key elements of the plot. Growing bewilderment, active public discussion and the beginning of an internal investigation laid the foundation for a large-scale political scandal that promised to reveal even more secrets and intrigues hidden behind the facade of democratic procedures. Chapter 3: Investigation of Intrigue. As news of the bizarre vote shift began to permeate every corner of the political arena, Donald Trump, determined to get to the bottom of it, decided to personally lead the investigation. Within hours of the polls closing, the president gathered his most trusted advisors and analysts in a small, darkened White House office. There, under dim lights and with news reports blaring in the background, the painstaking work of poring over every piece of data available, from electronic ballots to classified election reports, began. The team assembled for the task worked tirelessly, sifting through reams of documents and analyzing figures that had previously seemed impeccable. Every detail, every discrepancy in the reports, became for Trump a crucial piece of the puzzle that would soon come together to form a revealing canvas. He listened reports, asked questions, and constantly reminded his staff, "We cannot allow corruption to penetrate into the very heart of power. Find every mistake, every anomaly." These words sounded decisive, like orders, and inspired the team to work faster and more thoroughly. As the investigation gathered pace, clues began to emerge that pointed to systematic vote manipulation. Analysts found that certain precincts were seeing a sharp increase in the number of ballots cast in the final hours of voting, in ways that were clearly out of line with normal statistical patterns. Secret emails found in electronic archives and inconsistencies in the reporting led Trump to believe that these extra votes were not accidental but collusive. Each new fact, each anomaly discovered, brought the president closer to understanding the scale of the intrigue, which appeared to have been carefully orchestrated in advance. Late one evening, sitting at his desk with a strong cup of coffee, Trump studied the charts and graphs his team had compiled. His eyes sparkled with determination, and his face betrayed no doubt about the correctness of the chosen course. "Our job is to find the source of these votes, to understand who is behind this conspiracy, and to restore the people's trust," he said firmly, and his words echoed throughout the room. Then the experts began to look for connections between suspicious areas, identifying similar patterns in the ballot submissions and finding that specific groups, clearly connected to the political opposition, were behind the extra votes. One evening, an analyst reported that special attention should be paid to reports coming from districts where Biden's support had traditionally been high. Further analysis showed that these were precisely the regions where there had been a sharp surge in votes that did not fit into the framework of normal electoral dynamics. With each new discovery, the investigation acquired an ever larger scope. It was now clear that there was collusion behind these votes, and that its organizers may have been deliberately switching voter support to weaken the opponent's campaign. Trump, stunned by the scale of the irregularities, decided to act quickly and decisively. He ordered an immediate additional review of all the data and a series of closed-door meetings with election officials. During these meetings, officials who had previously hidden behind pro forma statements began to provide additional documents confirming the existence of anomalous transactions and hidden communications between Biden groups. Each new piece of evidence made the president increasingly convinced that his campaign had been the victim of a carefully orchestrated intervention aimed at changing the outcome of the election. A key part of the investigation was identifying the individuals involved in the scheme. After hours of work, investigators were able to link the extra votes to specific groups of voters, whose actions were backed by numerous electronic and documentary evidence. This data showed that secret groups working on behalf of the opposition were deliberately switching support to boost Trump's chances and undermine his rivals. This turn of events was a revelation, and a sense of a crisis of confidence in the electoral system began to grow within the White House. The painstakingly collected evidence, presented in the form of reports, closed-door video recordings, and emails, left no room for doubt. The entire voting process had been compromised. The revelation shook the administration and sparked a firestorm of debate at the highest levels of government. Donald Trump, seeing the scale of the corruption gradually emerging in reality, resolutely declared that such actions were unacceptable and would be stopped by all possible means. His personal investigation, which began as an attempt to restore justice, turned into a large-scale case capable of changing the course of political history of the country. Thus, the third chapter reveals the essence of the investigation of intrigues, from the first suspicious signals to the accumulation of irrefutable evidence of secret interference in the electoral process. This stage becomes the key one in the story, showing how detailed analysis, persistence, and determination can reveal the deepest corruption schemes that threaten the very foundations of democracy. The president, armed with facts and the support of his advisors, prepares for the next step, exposing the traitors, which will be the culmination of his fight for honesty and justice in the country. Chapter 4: Exposing Betrayal. On that fateful day, as the investigation reached its climax, the White House was in an atmosphere of tense anticipation of change. Donald Trump, surrounded by a coterie of trusted advisors and cybersecurity experts, was gathered in his spacious office with tall windows that let in the morning light but did little to dispel the dark aura that hung over the building. In front of him lay thick file cabinets overflowing with data, emails, videos, and financial reports that showed that some of the administration's top officials were secretly embezzling White House funds. Every artifact they found confirmed that this rogue group was systematically using its positions to enrich itself and manipulate decisions at the highest levels. Trump, clutching folders and looking at spreadsheets of numbers, felt a mixture of rage and determination building in his chest. His voice, hard and cold, sounded like a sentence at that moment: "We cannot allow public funds to disappear with impunity. This betrayal, which is corrupting the foundations of our democracy, must be eradicated." He ordered an immediate press conference to present all the evidence to the public. Every fact, every inconsistency in the reports became an irrefutable argument in his manuscript of justice, and his words echoed in the corridors of the White House. At a press conference attended by people from all walks of life, Trump took the stage in front of a throng of cameras, microphones, and reporters, ready to reveal a secret that many had only whispered about behind closed doors. His speech was data-heavy. A large screen behind him flashed footage of closed-door meetings, screenshots of emails, and charts showing anomalous financial transfers. "The numbers speak for themselves," he said, pointing to metrics that clearly showed how White House money was not being spent to benefit the people but was disappearing into shadowy transactions. His arguments, backed by documentary evidence, caused a storm of indignation and condemnation among those present, and also convinced many that corruption was thriving within the administration, capable of undermining trust in the government. With each new slide of the presentation, Trump not only exposed specific individuals, but also emphasized that such machinations should not take place in a modern democracy. He emphasized that honesty and transparency are the core values of his administration, and that anyone who violates these principles will be punished. His voice sounded like thunder, penetrating all barriers. "I will not tolerate traitors operating in the shadows threatening our future. We will cleanse our administration, and every guilty party will be held accountable." These words became a catalyst for change, and operational arrests began that same day. Employees involved in illegal operations were immediately detained by intelligence agencies and removed from their positions. The moment Trump finished his speech, the hall erupted in thunderous applause and cries of support, and the public across the country began discussing what had happened on social media and television. The news of the betrayal being exposed spread quickly, causing a wave of approval and pride in the president's decisiveness. For many, it was a sign that power based on honesty is capable of defeating any corrupt schemes, and the fight against traitors is the key to a new, just future. After the press conference, Trump sat in a small circle of trusted confidants to discuss what to do next. His team of operatives had already begun compiling lists of everyone involved in the scam and were preparing to turn over the evidence to the courts. The president ordered a full internal audit to ensure that every bit of stolen money was returned to the federal budget and that those responsible were punished to the fullest extent of the law. His words were decisive and final: "Today, we begin a new era in which treason and corruption will have no place. I will personally ensure that anyone who dares to break the law is held accountable." Thus, the culmination of the confrontation became a turning point in the history of his rule. The exposure of the secret network of corruption operating inside the White House not only restored the people's trust, but also became a symbol of a new era in which every official understands that state power is a sacred responsibility to the people. This day will forever go down in history as the moment when the power of truth and the determination of the leader were able to defeat the darkness of betrayal, and the restoration of order became the key to the prosperity and stability of the nation. Chapter 5: Retribution and Restoration of Order. On that fateful day, when the scale of the revelation of the secret corruption scheme reached its climax, the White House literally shook with the roar of change. Donald Trump, having collected all the indisputable evidence, thick folders of documents, emails, videotapes of closed meetings and detailed financial reports, went to a press conference to put an end to this dishonest betrayal. His voice, firm and confident, echoed through the room like a hammer breaking stone: "Today I declare a purge of the White House. Those who steal our nation's money will not have the right to control the destiny of America." Every word of his address reflected the president's determination to restore order, regain the people's trust and purge the system of corrupt elements. Behind him, footage of the evidence flashed on the screen, graphs of anomalous financial transactions outlining the scam, emails confirming collusion, and recordings of secret meetings in which participants exchanged instructions on how to embezzle funds. Stunned by what they saw, viewers listened as Trump laid out the details of the revelation, the names of the top officials involved in the illicit activity and the exact amounts stolen from government reserves. "These people," he said, "have turned our White House into a personal purse, violating every rule of honest government. We can no longer tolerate this betrayal that undermines the foundations of our democracy." The words, spoken with genuine anger and determination, galvanized the public's sense of justice and sent a message that corruption would be rooted out. Over the next few hours, the White House went into overdrive, with intelligence agencies swiftly arresting all those involved and removing the employees whose names appeared in the incriminating documents. Government offices were in turmoil, with the people at the center of the investigation trying to justify themselves, but the overwhelming evidence was destroying any attempt at a cover-up. Trump personally oversaw every step of the investigation, holding meetings with his most trusted advisors and demanding that every bit of stolen money be returned to the government. "We will start with a clean slate," he declared, "and never again allow corruption to permeate the highest echelons of government." His orders sounded like a solemn promise that justice would be done and the traitors would be punished. The public reacted immediately. News headlines, social media comments, and leading analysts' articles all signaled that the purge was a turning point in American politics. People tired of endless scandals and corruption were excited by the steps of a new president who, without being afraid to act decisively, proved that he was ready to protect the interests of the people at any cost. The public support and the approval of key experts gave Trump the strength to continue his reforms, and his speech became a symbol of the return of trust in the government. Over the next few days, a massive public debate broke out across the country about the need for transparency and accountability in the management of public resources. Human rights organizations and activists demanded that such frauds be investigated to the last detail and that those responsible be punished to the fullest extent of the law. New legislative initiatives began to gain momentum, aimed at strengthening control over the spending of public funds and preventing similar crimes in the future. Trump, confident in his rightness, emphasized that his actions were aimed not only at punishing specific individuals, but also at restoring the moral authority of the state. Thus, the culmination of this loud revelation became the starting point for deep reforms designed to restore justice in the White House and restore the people's trust in power. The victory of truth over corruption, demonstrated by the decisive measures of the new president, marked the beginning of a new era, where every official understood that state power is not a means of personal enrichment, but a sacred trust given to the people. This day went down in history as the moment when determination and the power of conviction were able to defeat the dark forces of betrayal, and when the restoration of order became the key to the prosperity and stability of the entire nation.